A man who's called Bobby by his friends, a fashion designer of repute who's made New York his home but still calls India his real home. We're talking about Bibhu Mohapatra. He's joining us on a spa red carpet. What a pleasure to have you on the show with us, Bibhu.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You know, Bibhu, when I do an internet search, the visuals that really come right in this big rush are those of Michelle Obama emerging from Air Force One wearing a Bibhu Mohapatra dress. But of course, a lot has gone into the making, reaching that point in history. You do create history by designing for celebrities, but that moment must have been a big one for you.
That was one of the exciting moments, and it took some time for me to realize that, and it took some time for it to seep into my my mindset. But it was a beautiful moment, and it was a time where I was so busy with my New York Fashion Week preparation. We made these clothes for the First Lady, and I knew she was coming to India, but then I forgot the details of it and when is she coming, and I didn't know really until like few minutes before it happened, and there it was, and I would cherish that moment for a long time, and I'll always be grateful to her for making that gesture, and my phone didn't stop ringing for at least 15 days after that, like day and night.
Yeah.
And I was overwhelmed by the response that particular moment.
But one would imagine that would be the case, and the kind of business model, if I can call it that you followed, and a lot of fashion designers are doing this as well, to be able to dress up celebrities.
Yes.
How crucial is it in today's day and age? Because obviously you started at a time when this wasn't as big as it is today. When you set up your label in 2009, this wasn't the biggest thing to do. You set it up step by step, but today it's become the fulcrum of all activity. How important is it? Like, you know, I've seen you do Glenn Close, Kate Blanchett, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jennifer Lopez, Oprah Winfrey. These are the biggest names that you can see on the red carpet. But within the entire business model that you're creating and positioning your brand, as it were, does it become the center of all things? Is that how, you know, you create brands today in the fashion circuit?
I mean, it is not. I wouldn't say that it's the main system behind building a brand, but it's a big supporting system. That it's pretty simple to have. It is important to have a celebrity endorse your brand or showing their support, and who have incredible amount of followers, and that's instant. That turns into visibility for your brand instantaneously. But lot other things had to kind of go hand in hand.
Sure. With
it as well, and also a lot has to go into who are you dressing and what sort of occasion you're dressing, and you have to have a strategy for it, and if there is no strategy, then you'll be dressing everyone, and then there's no voice to it. So it's so important to have, for a young brand like mine, to have that sort of a focused voice in who I'm dressing and how often. So there are a lot of like these moving parts, a lot of like little bit of science to it, but it is a big part of the brand building process these days.
But explain to me this business strategy that you're talking about. You are talking about dressing up your celebrities at one level, but I'm sure that's not the larger business, or is it?
No, a lot of the times it's just loan. You know, we loan them, but a lot of the times they purchase, and but what it does is it aspires people, and it gives that brand awareness that people follow your brand. You know, and with the help of today's social media,
sure.
It has really helped my brand. So it's quite instant, and I have had instances where I'll be sitting in my studio, and the doorbell would ring, and I would find just strangers standing there requesting to see the collection, and you know, at some point I asked them, how did you find us? And they pull out their Instagram page, and then they go into my page and they keep asking, do you have this and do you have that? So
right.
They follow, and they follow every time we post a celebrity pictures. They, you know, aspire to be a part of that dream.
How is it different to cater to celebrities in Hollywood as opposed to here back home in the Indian film industry. You have dressed up quite a few names over here,
yes.
and that includes the likes of Priyanka Chopra and Sonam Kapoor, you know, all-style icons. How differently does the process work here?
It's not that different really, and it's just logistically you have to send a lot of clothes to here, and you don't necessarily get to meet the celebrity, so that's when they basically you send them clothes and you hope that the fitting works. And but otherwise the process is the same. They work with amazing stylists and who follow your brand, follow my brand, I mean, and the celebrities themselves follow. And when Kangana Ranaut, when she won the national award the second time, she wore one of my dresses, and I didn't know. Thanks to social media, I found out that she's just gotten into the event to receive the award wearing one of my dresses, and I was excited about it.
But when you talk about the difference, when you talk about the following that you have, when you create dresses for celebrities in Hollywood or in Bollywood, is there a stark difference in the way that people come up to you and say you want more of this, and is that a good business model? Because surely that business model has changed since you started in the late 90s in New York.
I think there is a difference, and I think if some particular style has been worn by a celebrity, yes, the stores may request similar things, or at least you get stores' attentions or clients' attention. But we try not to really oversaturate that particular style because it's already been worn. It has done its job. So a lot of the times, once a celebrity wears it, no one wants to wear it. And in the West,
right.
And in here, I think if a celebrity wears something and if the same style is hanging in a store, it gets sold out. So, but it's a little bit of a difference. Depends on also who the celebrity is as well.
Sure.
So, what sort of following she has or he has. So, I think I see the. I see that a lot of requests comes in the categories. Like if I have a celebrity wearing a gown, then people pay attention to, they look for the gown category that I have offered, and it's not exactly the same style, but that category gets highlighted.
Right, right. And are there any categories in the recent past that have really grown as opposed to others?
Definitely. A lot of, like, you know, these days, these younger stylists, they're not wearing long dresses because if it's a black tie, they can still wear a short dress. And a lot of that has grown. And that is a category which I call the date dress category, not the cocktail dress or not the day dress. It's the perfect transitional dress that can take someone from day to evening seamlessly, that she doesn't have to go home and change again, because our lifestyles have changed and we have much less time than what we used to. So I find that category of perfect transitional outfits have grown, that need for that, and so I try to tap into that, and every season.
So there are these permutations and combinations that are being formed, and like you said, associations are at the heart of it. I've been talking to a lot of fashion designers, and to take the brand into different categories seems to be the game right now. So we'll talk about that a little later, and of course I want to understand your roots, because a lot, like I said, has gone into the making of Bibhu Mohapatra before Michelle Obama emerged from Air Force One wearing one of his outfits. That seems to be the big claim to fame right now, and you wouldn't want to run away from that, I'm sure. But we'll talk about what made him in just a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back to this edition of Aspire Red Carpet. We're in conversation with Bibhu Mohapatra, a big name in the world of fashion, but really when we talk about your contributions in India, that's something else that we're going to talk about, because you're kind of working so much with local artisans, keeping certain crafts alive. But even beyond that, just to understand how it all began for you. I understand that you stumbled upon fashion, or was this a conscious decision? You were an economics student, and I have come across so many such stories, especially from that period in time where a lot of people were doing something else. They didn't think of fashion as the big career move, but you did. You saw something that was possible for you there. How did it begin for you?
For me, it was, you know, growing up in Odisha in the early 90s, I knew I was very, very strongly interested in fashion or what other people were doing in fashion. Only thing I had is some experience in running my mother's sewing machine and making some clothes for my sister, just a self-taught tailor basically, and which I was really proud of, and I am really proud of that time, because that sort of allowed me to feel confident enough to find out about how does someone make a living being a fashion designer.
Right.
Where do you prepare for that? How do you go about that? And these are all pre-internet days in Orissa, and so I didn't have much information. But I knew as I grew older and I continued my studies in economics, I knew that I wanted to be in the world of fashion. I wanted to create things, and but I didn't have any options of going to school here. There was one fashion school here, and it seemed sort of less possible for a boy to go from Odisha to NIFT Delhi, where there are only limited amount of students every year are accepted. So happened that I applied for a master's degree in America, and I got a scholarship, and I
find it interesting that you're saying that it was easier to go to America than go to Delhi. But yeah, perhaps that was the case then. But you did manage to go for an economics, a course in economics in the University of Utah, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And it was, and it came with some financial assistance. So
sure.
it made it easier for me to pursue that. And then I also knew that there are some great art schools in the US that I could pursue a career in fashion.
Right.
So so it so happened that detour just happened, and I arrived in Utah, finished my degree and in economics, and my major professor saw accidentally my book, my drawing book, and she's the one who said, like, you need to go to New York.
This was while you were doodling in class?
This is sort of, and I had my sketchbook open, and she came into the lab and she saw it, and she was very encouraging, and she helped me tremendously by calling her colleagues in art departments, and where they allowed me to sit in the back of the class to learn sketching or take life drawing classes. So that sort of prepped me to apply at FIT for my degree in fashion.
Then to now, there is the radical shift that I was talking about in terms of how you build a fashion brand. Was there a plan, a strategy that you already had put in place, or was it learning on the job?
There is always a plan, but for me, I start with a plan, but I'm also open to sort of let it grow organically. Sure. And not everything goes as you plan. So it took me 3 years before I quit my job at Mandel to start my own thing. I knew that I needed to have a sort of a cleansing period between the job and starting a brand so that I could really think, because the whole draw for me to start my own brand was to be able to say something that is 100% of my own vocabulary.
Right.
And but when you're designing for another brand, you can't do that, because you have to make that brand's vocabulary yours and then understand who the brand's clients are.
There is always the question about, drawing inspiration as well, because sometimes you don't get lucky with that, right?
That's right.
To find the right niche, to find exactly where you're going to peg your brand, you might have an idea in your head,
right,
in terms of your design sensibility and where exactly you want to position that.
Yes.
That must have taken some doing, because yes, gathering the right people is one part of the job, but to set yourself on a target of putting forth where your brand stands, yes, and then doing it consistently.
That's right.
That must have been a process. Explain to us that, because tell us about the inspiration, how the entire thought of a collection really comes about, and how you work towards it, and how that process has changed since the time you started.
I think that's a very, very good question, and I've seen how I see things has changed since my first collection, and it was very exciting, because the first time I'm about to say what I want to say, that is entirely of my own vocabulary, but then I had to contain myself, I had to step back, I had to force myself, and that's when my friends came in to my drawing board, and here I'm presenting to them, this is what I'm going to, my collection is going to look like. But then, I had to step back and really look at it like, do I really need to say all this? And this is only the first collection. I have so many opportunities to really express myself. So let's stay focused on what I want to say. What is the clear message for this collection? So the editing process was the biggest learning experience for me. How the collection did. But you can only do that once you have a collection. Then you get reactions from others. How these pieces. My first collection had 16 looks, and out of those 16 looks, I think commercially maybe 7 or 8 were really hits.
Right.
The all others, which I thought, a lot of them I thought were going to be the biggest sellers. No, they were not. But somewhat less favorite designs, they were under a coat or something, became the biggest draw. So it's a constant learning process, and that informs my next collection.
That's right. And how are you reading into that? How are you using social media to do that? That's something else that we are talking about, including all his work that he's putting into the handloom traditions of Odisha, his home state. We'll talk about that in just a moment. To stay with us. Welcome back to this edition of Aspire Red Carpet. We're in conversation with Bibhu Mohapatra, the one fashion designer who's really kind of pushing the envelope, as it were. We're seeing a lot of collaborations that you're doing, and I'm seeing this across the board in the world of fashion. This is how you kind of take your brand into different categories. You've done it with a hosiery brand like Haynes, and I'm seeing you do it in a jewelry brand today for Forevermark as well. So, I mean, how exactly are you working this? What is the strategy at play here?
I think first you have to get the interest of these brands. You know, it has to be interesting to the other side as well. I always wanted to have a fine jewelry collection, but I knew that I need to partner with a brand that whose like core ethos sort of blends with mine, and that could give me the support system to create that unique collection of jewelry that stands out, that has some unique attributes that would get people's attention, people will be curious about. So we get opportunities. It comes both ways. We send proposals to brands. A lot of the times we get proposals, given proposals, so we evaluate them, and a lot of the times we decide whether is this the right time to embark on this journey for the brand at this moment, or we wait for 2 months or 2 years for that.
Yeah, so like this one with Forevermark has taken its time to bear fruition, really. I know that you've been talking about it, saying something is in the offing, but now it's finally taken shape.
Absolutely.
So these things do sometimes take time, and you're foraying into jewelry for the first time.
Yes.
Do tell us about the process, because yes, you've done the outside design, but I understand that an Italian house has actually structured it for you architecturally to kind of put it into motion what your ideas in jewelry are. And that again is something that you're going to try and test, because if this works for you, would we see Bibhu Mohapatra doing more of jewelry in the future as well?
Yes. I really am into it, because the conversation started 2 years ago over coffee with Mr. Sachin Jain and his amazing team from Forevermark, and what I took away from that meeting is that we both wanted to collaborate on a collection that is really a luxury fine jewelry collection, but by including, not by being exclusive. We wanted to do a collection that would have a meaning in many lives. We didn't just want to make one-of-a-kind piece and just make news about it.
Right.
That was not my goal, and I think Sachin was also thinking the same way, and that sort of gave us the real idea of what we want to do. But I also knew that I'm not trained in jewelry. I am not trained in seeing diamonds, fine diamonds, or how the technical side of it.
Sure.
So I was very clear that I will be leaning on their team to help me understand that. So it has been a tremendously learning experience for me, and I feel that now I'm empowered to embark on the next chapter of this.
I'm wondering if the cause of helping the handloom craft in Odisha is as much of a cause as it is a business decision, because you're putting yourself out there. There is an investment of time, of effort. Yes, there is the larger cause of helping these weavers and keeping a craft alive, but tell us more about that, because something that you've been working on. It's something that's close to your heart. But I see a lot of fashion designers wanting to do this because of the possibilities that exist, and people are looking for novelty. Whether it's India or the world at large, whether it's fabrics, the way weaves are done, all of that requires a new influx of ideas, and you're seeing some of that shape up as you move along with revivals of various kinds.
No, totally. And this, I've been involved in this handloom weaving ikat project in Orissa. And Orissa, as you know, has a long tradition of its own unique style of ikat. And there are all these villages that created incredible qualities and amounts of handloom materials. But unfortunately, with the popularization of machine mills has sort of killed them, and it started from the 70s or late 60s on, and when the terry cotton or the terylin the things became the biggest fad.
Yeah,
and
they're very popular.
And so I was approached by the Chief Minister, Mr. Patnaik, and who's a friend of mine, and I got involved in it. But my thing was that I want to work closely with these weavers, and I want to understand what they need, because they've been exploited for decades. And as a part of this project, I was taken to 5 different villages, weaving communities in Orissa, and what I saw there broke my heart. There were no young generation left in those villages, and the entire burden of keeping this beautiful traditional craft alive was on these weavers who are just barely getting by.
Right.
They don't even have electricity. They don't forget about sanitation or healthcare.
And there are so many of them, right?
Yes, a lot of them, and it was dismal, and it was very disappointing. And but I was given hope that let's start this and it will happen.
And where do you look for inspiration now? Because I know that there are a lot of things that you've been inspired by for your many collections. The last one that we know about by the Empress Dowager as well. Do tell us exactly how this entire system works for you, and whether we are likely to see that change considering the nature of your business and how it's moved in recent times.
See, I draw my inspiration from people. Stories are important to me, and these people do not have to be fashion people, or they can be artists, filmmakers, or writers from 50 decades back. But it is important for me to collect their stories, and I have a vast library, my most important possession of stories on people that I have found or read, and I would just have tear sheets. I'd make a folder and keep them, and those are my main source of inspiration. Plus, I'm inspired by travels or different cultures, and I draw and look at those stories and what inspires me, and then within that, I decide on the design details and what sort of fabrics. But I look at people and their stories, and that's what my main source of inspiration. I don't think I'm at risk of running out of those stories and meeting or finding out about interesting people.
Yes.
So,
as small as the world is getting, of course, there are so many possibilities, and not all of them have been explored, thankfully. There is so much more to see.
Absolutely.
And to learn, and then see translated in the kind of designs that you create. It's a pleasure talking to you, Bibhu. Great luck for the future as well.
thank you very much.